Hello, fellow metallurgists. Got a good one here for you today. My name is Kellen from Kellen for Company, and I'm going to be talking about the latest full length from rsti entitled Aldrlock. So Aldrlock marks the sixth full length from this project from between Iceland and Germany. Some members previously who were in a band called Hellrunar. They are kind of playing in a pagan black metal style. For anyone who's familiar with the early work of Enslaved, Falkenbach, Moonsorrow, that's a good starting point if you're trying to get into understanding what this band's all about. So when I'm getting into this style of black metal, the first thing that I'm always looking for is to at least make sure, even though it's a pagan or folk inspired black metal band, that first and foremost the black metal portion of their performances are believable. That's the most important aspect to the band. rsti don't let me down here. I've been listening to this band now for a while, and they get the black metal portion right. I mean, there's enough aggression. It's not purely sort of a foray into folk culture. The black metal part of it is convincing, delivered with enough aggression to sort of appease a black metal and extreme metal fan. So one of the unique aspects of rsti is how committed they are to Old Norse and Icelandic history, and how that informs the actual music that they are creating. What I mean to say about that is some black metal bands will take sort of themes and tropes established within Viking culture, and they'll use that sort of as a sort of secondary informative way to kind of get into their music. So it's not necessarily specific to any particular time in history or an event. It's sort of, you know what Vikings are all about. We're going to make some amazing black metal that sound like Vikings made it. Aldrlock is very much focused in a very specific time period in Icelandic and Norse history. It's that element of making sure that the story that they're telling and the history associated with it is well researched, well thought out, and close enough to the source material in their sort of adoption of it, that it's always important when you go into every one of their records to realize just what sort of historical context informs it. So a little bit of history here. In the 10th and 11th century, Christianity finally makes its way into Iceland. In previous centuries, since the 4th century AD, Christianity had crept further and further across Europe, in getting all the way into Scandinavia, but because of Iceland's sort of secluded nature as an island, it did not feel the influence and threat of Christianity until the 10th and 11th century. It's actually unique as a country in the sense that its isolation was able to retain Norse mythology, religious practices, culture, language, longer than some of the Scandinavian countries, just because of how removed it was from the mainland. But here, the arrival of Christianity threatens the people of Iceland, and that history is told through sort of a central figure here on Aldrlock. The beginning of the story, his mother is murdered. He feels sort of the threat and violence coming to his community, and is fraught with all sorts of fears, dilemmas as to how to understand himself, the world around him, and his gods, as they seemingly are threatened by the arrival of this new people, this new god, this new religion, a new way of life in Iceland's history. So the next key piece when I talk about this band is I want to dive into something that is kind of thrown around sometimes when we're talking about music, and there's a notion of a world-building album or band. What that means to me is a record is able to take an individual into a particular time and place and present them sort of in a fictional world that they can sort of see, feel, imagine in the present. So it's a cool idea and concept that bands are able to sort of conjure if they're competent enough in doing so. And sometimes great records have that sort of personality trait. rsti license does that, and in a way that I think is elite or exceptional when we talk about that identity or sort of talent as a band. What a great world-building band can do is not just give you that sense of sort of immediate world that you inhabit, but also give the listener the sort of perception that beyond what they feel in that present moment when they put on the record, at every single point in time, they know that they're just inhabiting one chapter in a broader story. That there is sort of this horizon that is persistent during the course of your listen, that you're never going to arrive at, but the band is able to sort of conjure and create, knowing that you'll never grasp it in its entirety. And I think that is a talent that this band has. Their records play out over a much longer time frame, and in doing so they can sort of patiently map out and create a world for the listener to experience that isn't a rush to get anywhere, that does ask for your sort of patience and willingness to sort of move through this particular time in history as these fictional characters potentially lived through it, they fought through it, they feared through it, they bled through it, they tried to live out their life during this time period in the 10th, 11th century like our character does, and every single emotion that they may experience, their anxiety, their anger, their fear, their frustration, their contempt, how that is able to sort of play out over the course of a record gives that sort of immediate sense for you, but also you sort of have this idea that there's a world beyond every single passing moment of what this record is. So one of the things I should mention here is I'm not going to be trying or failing to pronounce any of the song titles for this album. They're all in Old Norse, and even in the liner notes, the English translation just has a numerical designation. It doesn't actually have a translation for the song. So just as it would appear to you if you are streaming the record or don't own it, for the sake of coherency, I'm just going to name them numerically for you to reference. So from the opening track here, as it builds with this sort of throat singing style, it launches into something a bit more sort of anthemic, builds in size, takes off into something very familiar as a black metal listen, only to withdraw into more sung vocals. Within the first, really, as we get going 5 minutes into this, you can see how patient they are in building a song, letting it sort of completely unfold into something black metal, only to withdraw it into a personality that is 100% pagan. The second track here just moves seamlessly from the first, takes off into something just as aggressive. Now the back end of the song is where it gets a little bit interesting for me. We see sort of this, these sort of chanting, almost it feels like you're on a longboat, and with each oar stroke, sort of this group of Vikings chanting back and forth as the boat moves along. It marks sort of a key sort of feature vocally on the back end of that song, moves seamlessly towards something a bit more black metal and withdraws into it once again. So here you can see the band has that ability to kind of move in and out of not only sort of black metal pieces into acoustic elements, but also into different kind of vocal ability as well. When I come back to an rsti licensed record, I always get that sense that they've able to sort of build this world, and I'm just going to get one glimpse at it. It'll last 80 minutes, and it'll sort of be gone. But it's a rare talent that a band that can not only have once, but to deliver it as an expectation to the listener. That every single time they put on a record, they're going to be able to kind of go through this experience. Great literature does that. And the fact that this band is so well focused, not only in history, but also on the lyrical contributions to their songs, it plays out in a way that I think is elemental to who they are as a band. So this kind of structure and epic narrative quality that I kind of hinted at there. Their albums are notably long. We're looking at around 80 minutes. The songs here, for the most part, sit around a 10-minute mark. I think the longest is at 14. Well, there are some shorter songs. If your short songs are 6 minutes long, it kind of gives you an idea of the scale of artistry on display. That being said, the kind of riffs and black metal portion to their sound isn't dramatically complex. They have these sort of long arcing structures in terms of the black metal songwriting. What's interesting is how within those 10 minutes, with these long arcing riffs, you would seem to sort of be concerned that you could get sort of lost in all that space. How they break it up is there's two major contributions that I want to bring to mind. One is there is a almost ambient and acoustic spoken word narrative side to this band. We're going to get to the lyrics in a second here, but they do kind of move through a black metal portion, and then you'll get these really quiet open spaces where Marcel does like these spoken word sort of narrative storytelling. It also does include lots of acoustic instruments. I believe a viola, cello. I think there are real horns here. It's not a keyboard. It sounds to me like real horns are being used. An army of vocalists. I know all three band members contribute to the vocals, but some of the chanting and vocal arrangements here sound like there's 15 different people in the room. This band is divided, in terms of just the black metal screaming, but we have, like I mentioned, these sort of sung choral arrangements. There's sort of throat chanting and Marcel's spoken word side of things. All those different implementations of how you want to approach a black metal, pagan black metal sound vocally are on display. And then they help, along with the acoustic instrumentation, to divide these 10-minute long songs into sort of chapters or paragraphs within a chapter, pieces within a story, and that do unfold and have meaning and direction. But what's important to keep in mind when I say that is they are trying to tell a story. This is part of a very specific Icelandic history. And to not approach all of those elements together, to try and take them on and within an individual sort of aspect, hoping that you'll be sort of fully realizing what this band and these albums are about, I think is missing the picture. And that's going to pull me to this last piece when I talk about their sound, which is lyrical contributions. It's incredibly well researched, and I'll provide sort of a short little video clip or photo of all the Old Norse poetry that has been researched and pulled and indexed in the liner notes for you to sort of go through and see where they're citing as influences. These albums lyrically have different sort of characters and narrators. As on this particular Aldrlock listen, we have sort of a black metal vocal which is written in first person, meaning your character who's as the world that he sees it and inhabits. Often Marcel's spoken word serves as second person narrator someone who's describing sort of this story. And often the sung sort of choral vocals that they all contribute to serve as a way to sort of bring to life these old poems that serve as like reflections on our old memory. Remember, this album is about the threat of losing one's culture, right? And this protagonist is grappling with a world that seems to be disappearing, that is losing his sense of faith, his family, his people, culture, history, God. All of that is threatened. And throughout this record, these choral chants come back, and they serve to sort of mark or points of reflection, reminders of sort of ancestry, spirits now deceased, about how your past can still live on. This record probably comes to the most prominent moment on the 7th track. It's a standout moment on the record, and within the storytelling of Aldrlock, it's also sort of a turning point. The song is completely spoken word and instrumental, probably one of the quietest pieces and more melancholic, emotional moments on this record. And it closes out with this beautiful orchestration that coincides with, after Marcel's spoken word, the chants come in, and it's this poetry talking about an individual's unwillingness to be repentant for his or her beliefs. That gods here have tasked me with work, and I will not sort of apologize for it in serving them. And it's just the poetry here, just as an example of how lyrics, songs come together. The spoken word portion by Marcel is talking about this character in complete sort of confusion and loss with the world that is leaving him. And the beginning portion of the story, his mother is killed in front of his eyes. And as Marcel tells this story of the character reflecting on his dead mother, he hears her voice. And then the song kicks back in, talking about this prayer in servitude of old Norse gods. Rarely do we get a pagan black metal record. It's something that's always below the surface. Something that we always think about when we listen to these records is sort of a champion of gods gone by, attempting to hold on to a religion, a time, a history that's seemingly washed away by modernity. It is implicit in black metal as a concept, and pagan black metal specifically, but rarely do we get a chance to mourn for its loss. And it's a beautiful moment on this record. Rarely do we get a sense of collective cultural grieving for something that is gone. And this moment on the record, every single time, it takes, a different turn in terms of how you can explore these sort of concepts through a pagan black metal record. And the next track, erupts into something a bit more what we're familiar with. But the ability to sort of navigate that sort of emotional spectrum is one of the greatest strengths that this band has, and it's in complete relief on this record. One of the best moments I've had, not just in black metal, but in metal recently, period. The 8th track here is a good example of how we can move from one sort of emotional dynamic being its most somber and reflective into one that is its most tumultuous. The 8th track here, just like we have a character grieving for his mother, for the loss of its culture and people, the next section of the story completely marries with what's happening musically, which is sort of a tumultuous eruption, right? Iceland as a country is a volcanic country. It has a active volcanoes there, and in this scene, lyrically, what is happening is sort of this moment of rebirth with the countryside. All of its volatility and explosion. It's some of this sort of protest, attempt to reclaim a part of the country that doesn't belong to modern Christianity, right? In ways that you can take away one's language, one's God, in an attempt to sort of suppress the people's history and social practices. The land here operates sort of as a defender, or as a way to reclaim a people in time and place. And just as that's happening lyrically, this 8th track erupts into something equally as aggressive. Just another example, not only how this band can explore sort of a quieter, more reflective emotional dynamic, but how that can also play up into one of its most volatile and aggressive side. I knew going into this record I was going to love it, but this band does something consistently that always grabs me, which is they're trying to sort of push what this subgenre is to a new place, to greater extents. And if that means that they have to sort of be left to the side because it's so much built around narrative qualities, behind lyrical qualities, behind old poetry, that it loses a sense of tangibility or respectability in terms of making it a black metal record, then so be it. Sort of my closing thoughts here are this record is listening to it, how intensive the process was for me, trying to dive into all of its details because I knew they were going to be there for me. I kept on trying to ask, is this still a black metal project? There's so much involved here. If you're just trying to serve this up to someone who's looking for a great black metal record, it may be too much to ask, in the sense that we're used to sort of rifling through records at some surface level without fully investigating them. Our Cedar License almost seems to say, if that's what you're interested in, we're not for you. And I'm completely okay with that. This has been a challenging listen to kind of sit through and go through multiple lyric sheets, look through old poetry, but I have spent the past month, this was released at the very end of May, and trying to dive into this record was a task, but in a way that challenges not just what I think genre convention is, but what I think bands should be able to sometimes ask of us. If they're going to put this much effort into putting out a record, I think it's fair in return that they say, if you want to understand what we're fully about, you're going to have to put a little bit more yourself in this listen. So is this for everyone? This may be a little bit more of an investment at 80 minutes long. There's a lot of lyrics to dive into, translations to go about 10, 12, 14-minute long songs. So be it. This is not an easy listen, and this is not a band that has ever been necessarily about 40 minutes in and out, get your black metal and you're gone. So I can completely understand for people who want to pass on it. But for those who want something of a higher caliber, 100% you should be checking this out. It's an amazing listen. My favorite record here in 2024. And if that means that it's no longer a black metal record, it's just an extreme metal record or a pagan record, whatever you want to call it, in my opinion, 100% worth your time. Rsti license, Aldrlock. For my call to arms, here we go. It's everyone's favorite new Polish gore grind band. Let's say it all together. 3, 2, 1. Meat Spreader. So this is the newest Meat Spreader record, entitled Mental Disease Transmitted by a Radioactive Fear. For those who don't know, this is a project composed of members previously of Dead Infection, Squash Bowels, and Eternal Rot. So plenty of gore grind royalty and pedigree to this band. I don't think A lot of dead infection has sort of dissolved at this point in time. But if you like killer, gore grind, and squash battles, dead infection are your thing, go check out Meat Spreader. It's been a good year for grindcore, but this one ranks at the top of the list for me. That's my call to arms there. Like I said, I can't tell you enough good things about rsti Lifesins Aldrlock. 100% with your time. For all you sick freaks at heavy metallurgy, check out Meat Spreader. All right, that's all I got for you. See you guys later. Bye.